We're a different sort of thief here. Deception and misdirection are our tools. We don't believe in hard work when a false face and a good line can do so much more. What's up, everybody? Welcome back to the Geek Pantheon. I am Eric, and that was a quote, censored quote from The Lies of Locke Lamora, which is a book that I feel like is a great point of inspiration for the Mastermind Rogue Subclass that we are talking about today. Because boy, like so many elements, if you all have read that book, so many elements of this subclass just slot in perfectly into that story, into that world, and it fits really well. But we're going to get into all of that with the Mastermind. First off, though, let's talk about what is the Mastermind. What can they do? So the first thing is at third level, you get Master of Intrigue, which off the bat gets you proficiency in Disguise Kit, Forgery Kit, one gambling set of your choice, and you learn 2 additional languages. And boy, there's a lot of out of combat stuff that you can do crazy there, which is great. Like, I love the class features that you get that can enhance the other aspects of the game besides structured combat. And so having proficiency in disguise kits, forgery kits, gambling sets to a certain extent, but the disguise kit and the forgery kit and the capacity to speak languages are huge when it comes to getting around certain social obstacles that the DM might throw in front of you. Whether that's, oh, you need invites to that exclusive gala, I can handle that. Oh, they're expecting a certain person from a certain nation to show up at this time, I can take care of that. Because additionally, the other part of Master of Intrigue is if you spend 1 minute listening to somebody talk, you gain the ability to mimic their accent and speech pattern to where you can sound like a resident of wherever they're from, which is really cool. And it says provided you know the language, which I as a DM would have a little bit of a looser rein on, because obviously you could listen to somebody speaking common, you could listen to an elf speaking common and be able to pick up on the speech patterns and the accent of an elf speaking common to where you could make somebody believe you are an elf speaking common without necessarily being able to speak Elvish. Now, if you try to do it with an elf and they start speaking Elvish, then you're in trouble. But if you're just trying to, come across as somebody from a certain elven nation, I would allow a player character that doesn't speak Elvish to be able to pull that off by just listening to an elf speak in common. Then the other thing at third level is Master of Tactics, which, boy, we're really swinging the pendulum from like out of combat utility stuff with Master of Intrigue to like all combat all day, and skill challenges as well. But basically, you can take the help action as a bonus action, which, whoa. And then additionally, if you're using the help action to grant advantage to an ally when attacking a creature, you can still do it as a bonus action. And your range, normally for the help action, it's 5 feet. You can help an ally attack a creature that is within 5 feet of you. Now it's 30 feet. You can give the help action against a target that's 30 feet away as a bonus action, which, I mean, just you do this so much in combat. Like you're granting advantage on attacks and you don't have to give up your action to do it. And so, yeah, you would absolutely should be feinting and all this stuff. And from a flavor standpoint, yeah, it's just the idea that your mind works so quickly. You've been in so many combats, whatever justification you want to give, that you know exactly how to poke and prod your enemies to get them on their heels, distracted, looking over their shoulder, to where you're constantly granting advantage to allies because you know how to throw your voice to make a sound over their shoulder to cause them to quickly look over and make sure nobody's sneaking up behind them, or you know how to kick dirt up and cause it to fly up into their nostrils and hinder their breathing. You could do so many flavorful things that you would normally do with the help action, but you're just so much better and so much quicker when it comes to doing that stuff. Then at 9th level, if you spend at least 1 minute observing or interacting with a creature, you can learn from the Dungeon Master whether or not that creature is superior, equal, inferior to you in 2 out of the 4 choices. And the choices are intelligence, wisdom, charisma, and then class levels if they have any. And then additionally, the DM might also allow you to know part of their history or personality based on your observations, but that's less codified and up to the DM. But like those 4 things, you getting to pick 2 after 1 minute of observing an interaction with a certain creature is huge, because you obviously would be taking notes as a player. You should be taking notes as a player, but you're also a mastermind. So clearly you're trying to stay ahead of everything. So if it's like a monster or a beast or something that, has a consistent stat array, if you're just observing some wolves in the wild and you do that for a minute and ask your DM, okay, wisdom. It's like, okay, that's their wisdom score is inferior to mine. I have a wisdom of, let's say, 12. So I know that they have less than a 12, which means it's not their best stat. And then you might have a charisma of 15. And it's like, that wolf has a higher charisma than you. It's like, that's a very dashing wolf. Noted. And what this does is allows you to communicate to your casters like, hey, don't go after these saving throws because they're really good at that. And that can be a really interesting way for you using your powers of observation and like your higher intellect as a mastermind to help the rest of the party through your observations and note taking and noting behaviors in certain creatures and things like that. That's really cool. That's really fun. And it can also inform your roleplay down the road, because if you know that a certain like NPC has a super low wisdom score, then you can be like, okay, this person is kind of dense. Lie to them, because you know that their insight check is going to be really low. And so you know that deception is going to be the better way to try to manipulate them as opposed to something else. And so that can be a really interesting and fun thing to do. And it just kind of reinforces that like higher level, not necessarily intellect, but just you're an observant person. You're constantly taking note of the world around you. And I think that is much more indicative of playing a mastermind, is you are hyper observant and you are aware of everything that's going on around you and how people are interacting and acting, as opposed to just being hyper intelligent. You know people, you know how people act, how they talk, because you look at all of these things. Well, not all of them, but a lot of these things are directly relating to observing people and then mimicking their speech patterns or learning about their personality or their weaknesses, things like that. So keep that in mind, that you are playing a very observant person, not necessarily a super smart person. But before we continue, if you are enjoying this video and want to be part of the discussion surrounding it, we have a link to our Discord server down below. Go join the Discord and talk about D&D and all sorts of other fun stuff that we talk about over there. We also have a Patreon, patreon.com/thegeekpantheon. If you want to financially support the channel, that would be wonderful and beautiful of you. And yeah, be sure to comment down below. Let me know what you think of the Mastermind subclass. Do you want to play one? Is this like an exciting idea for you in terms of a subclass? And be sure to like the video and subscribe to the channel. 13th level, misdirection. So basically, if you are being attacked, if you're the target of an attack, and there is a creature within 5 feet of you that's granting you any level of cover, you can use your reaction to have the attack target that person instead. So, if there's a enemy archer shooting at you, but one of their allies is, right in front of you swinging a sword, and so providing a little bit of cover, you can like basically pull them into the line of the arrow. Or if it's an ally, you could also do that. And so this one's extremely situational. And you could be in charge of it to a certain extent. You could keep track of where you are on the battlefield and, pivot around. Like if somebody runs up to attack you, you're shuffling your feet and making sure that, they're constantly in between that archer and you. And it becomes a little dance of trying to maintain that level of cover. So that can be interesting. And I think that this is it's a fun, flavorful ability that might make your party fighter or just tank in general really agitated with you. But yeah, it's a fun thing. And I think it matches the flavor of the mastermind of, always being aware of what's going on around them and being able to use their environment to their advantage. And then Soul of Deceit at 17th level. This one's wild to me. Like, I understand in concept, but trying to conceive this ability it hurts my brain. So essentially you build up a certain level of immunity to having your mind read by constantly having false thoughts happening on the surface of your mind while your actual mind happens underneath it. And so you can make a deception check against the mind reader's insight check to get them to believe that you're just thinking about spoons at that moment instead of plotting to take down the evil king or something like that. So that one is super interesting to think about and try to unpack. and you've just built up this resiliency in your mind where you constantly have these mundane thoughts happening on the surface level while the rest of your mind actually does the heavy lifting and the work. And then additionally, you're immune to zone of truth. You're immune to zone of truth. Any magical means of telling whether or not you are telling the truth reads as you telling the truth if you choose. And you can't be compelled to tell the truth by magic. Like, whoa, that's wild to me. And I mean, it fits. Like, it's the 17th level. It's the capstone ability. So, I mean, absolutely it should be powerful. But this is great. So let's talk about playing this character. So like I said, you're a hyper observant, hyper vigilant character that is constantly looking at the world around them, noting the world around them, and using your observations as a toolkit. At a given moment, you could throw on your disguise kit, make yourself up to look like a foreign dignitary from another continent, and because you've observed a merchant speaking in that style, you can throw on the accent, and if you speak the same language, you could just sound like a native speaker of that language and go into the exquisite gala because you can forge the invitation and go in and just dupe everybody. And if you're a high enough level, even if they cast Zone of Truth on you at the door and is like, are you really who you say you are? Yes, I am. I am so-and-so from this continent. Okay, you're free to go. And so that is an extremely powerful character for certain campaigns. Other campaigns, utterly useless. Like the help action thing, the Master of Tactics is going to be useful in every campaign. So, I mean, bonus actions are a valuable commodity when it comes to the action economy and depending on what you're doing with other aspects of your class. Because obviously if you're 2-up in fighting, then you're using your bonus action for that a lot and things like that. But like being able to grant advantage to an ally from 30 feet away as a bonus action is pretty huge and is going to just make your party members that much more effective. And so a lot of communication happening. I would encourage in character about tactics and knowing like you don't want to like target your sorcerer to give them advantage with the help action, but then all of a sudden, oh no, they were going to cast something that requires a saving throw, and so that was wasted. But then also if you're in a social encounter, keep in mind that like it's not just for combat, the help action, and it's not just for skill challenges. If you're trying to bluff your way in to that gala, let's say, and the party's paladin is your date for the night and they have a terrible deception check, then you could like lie as your action, like make the deception check and then say, as a bonus action, I want to give the help action to my companion to give them advantage on the deception check to try and get in. And then you can flavor that however you want, whether you're like using sleight of hand to create a distraction or something, or through your own lies, creating a sense of urgency that makes them kind of pass over your companion. So don't constrain yourself with the Master of Tactics to just tactical situations. Like it is applicable so much more and can really feed into the strengths of this character as well as benefiting in combat, which is also, you're a rogue. So, I mean, that's also advantageous. Types of campaigns and parties that this would fit in well with: urban campaigns all day long. If you are running a campaign in a city, this character would fit in so well at like talking to people in the city, observing people, going like, if you want to talk about like a character whose most valuable thing to do during downtime is just go people watch, like that, you could mimic so many, like go to the market square and just people watch for an hour. You only have to observe somebody for 1 minute talking. And so you can just pick different people out and just be like, okay, elf from this nation, dwarf from this nation, and just write down all the different nations that you can now convince people that you are a native speaker in. And that like, that's so cool. That would be such a cool thing to do as a character in a city-based campaign. Additionally, the capacity to use disguise kits and forgery kits lend themselves very well to urban campaigns. But also, I mean, campaigns where you're having to trek across the country, being able to forge writs of passage, also really good. I would say that unsurprisingly, the Mastermind really works well in a campaign where the PCs are criminals or at least railing against the law or the established law of the land at like a tyrannical governing body or something like that. This character would also work really well in that kind of setting. Running for this character, being a DM for the Mastermind. So the biggest thing is providing them opportunities to use their abilities, because this is a subclass that I could see a player being elated to take. Looking at all of the different things that you can do with disguise kits, forgery kits, being able to mimic accents, being able to shield your mind from being read, and negating zone of truth, and ducking behind enemies as their allies try to attack you, and all these cool things. I could see somebody being so excited and never or rarely getting the opportunity to make use of them just by virtue of how the campaign and adventures are designed. So if you have a player that's really excited about being a mastermind, give them lots of opportunities to use a disguise kit, to use a forgery kit, to go make money gambling. Like they have proficiency in a gambling kit. They could go to a street corner and set up a table and be like, hey, find the ball underneath the cup. And, you know, they can make decent money that way, and they get to learn 2 additional languages, which feeds into their mimicry. I think that the capacity to mimic and act like a native speaker of a variety of nations is super fun and not game breaking at all. Like, I would absolutely, if the mastermind is taking the time to learn how to speak like somebody from a certain nation, and then they go to deceive somebody as a member of that nation. I mean, for the accent, would not require a deception check. They spent the time doing it. Like it says in the rules, they can pass as a native speaker. So they don't need to make a deception check to pass as a native speaker. So that's the big thing. And then, you know, if cultural norms get brought up or something, then you can like bring in history checks, deception, even charm. If they're not trying to deceive in the moment, then you could be a lot more flexible in what checks you're calling for. And, you know, if you have a really experienced player, then you may have them coming to you and being like, hey, how much time do you have in between sessions? Okay, how many different nationalities do you think it's reasonable for me to have been able to pick up? Or if they're seeking out a specific one that's kind of rare, like let's say that I'm an Eberron nerd, we all know this. Let's say I'm running a campaign that takes place in Fairhaven, which is in Ondare, and it's really far away from Arenal, which is this whole separate continent full of elves of the Undying Court. And let's say that I have a player character that they know that it's going to be beneficial if they can pass themselves off as an elf from Arenal. And they ask me as the DM, I want to go see if I can track down and observe an elf from Arenal speaking for a minute so I can pick that up. Be like, that is pretty rare. So in that instance, I'm going to ask for a streetwise check to ask around, see if you can locate an elf from Arenal that you can observe talking or go up and talk to, and keep the conversation going for a minute to where you can access that. So there are barriers that you can throw in front of players in order to make the game more difficult. It seems like the wrong word, but just, you know, bring the dice into the equation for the D&D game. But if it's like a neighboring nation or like a trade partner, then no, like they can find somebody. That's not going to be hard. The player is a mastermind. They're not dumb. And also absolutely keep track of the whole granting cover in combat if there's a ranged attack coming and there's another character in between. Keep track of that. I don't run with maps and minis at my tables. I do Theater of the Mind, so this would be more difficult for me. But it might also be on the player to, you know, say, hey, can I position myself in a way to where this person that's run up to me and fighting me is granting me cover against the other enemies? So if the player asks that, sure, yeah, you can pivot that way. But also keeping track of that as a dungeon master and being able to make sure that they can make use of that ability is also really important. But the biggest thing as a DM, if you have a player character playing a mastermind, I mean, don't get upset with obsessive note-taking. That's who they are. Every time they gain access to pretending to be a native speaker of a nation, they should be writing that down. And anytime they learn something about that nation, they should be writing that down to further bolster their tool set. Every time they have an opportunity to spend 1 minute observing a creature, a beast, a humanoid, a fae, like they should be doing that and noting it. And that is the whole point of their character. And I know that some DMs out there, I've read stories from some DMs out there, they get really annoyed when they feel like their players are taking so many notes because they're trying to beat the game or win. That's the whole point of this subclass, like, is to build up a toolkit of knowledge and using that knowledge to help the party. It's not a spellcasting class. They don't get like crazy martial abilities. Like their whole deal is knowledge is power. So as DM, don't get annoyed by that. Let them take notes, let them observe things, and let them have fun with it. Thank you all so much for watching. Let me know down below what you thought. Are there any subclasses you would like me to check out in the future? Let me know. Subscribe to the channel, and I will see you next time.